Welcome to the Leather Journey. I'm Dex, and we've got some exciting things we're going to have coming up in the spring. I'm going to have a big announcement early January. I'm going to ask you to keep your eye on the channel and look for that big announcement. We just finished up doing a convention in Myrtle Beach, Carolina Coastal Fetish Fair. And it was a great time, rejuvenating. I had the opportunity to teach 4 hours of whip workshops, and then the dungeon play in the evening was exceptional. I had friends. One friend came all the way from the Netherlands, and I had a couple friends from upstate New York and a friend from New York City. All came down, and of course Moodstone was there, and Irish Red was able to go. In fact, Irish Red was my demo bottom for the workshops. We did 3 workshops, total of 4 hours. The first was my basic Whips in the Dungeon workshop, where I teach the 4 techniques. If you've watched my other channel, then you are familiar with the 4 techniques I teach for throwing whips in the dungeon. Then the second workshop was to crack or not to crack, which was really about, well, a little bit of music appreciation and knowing when it's appropriate to crack in the dungeon, not appropriate to crack in the dungeon, but also there was a focus on the techniques of what I call a control puff. I teach control puff 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time you get up to about a control puff 6 or 7, the whip is going to naturally crack as it rolls out. And so part of the workshop is getting folks to realize that you don't have to crack all the time. The other part of the workshop is to show them how to control the whip and finesse it in ways that don't require a crack, unless the music and the energy in the dungeon is screaming crack, then of course you have to crack. Then the final workshop was a 2-pronged approach. The first half was rhythm whips, throwing a whip in rhythm to the music, regardless of what that music or genre is. And then the second half was 2-hand whip work. And I thought it went really well. In fact, I'm about to set my whips back up. Most of you know when I play in the dungeon, I don't use the same crackers between whip bottoms. So all of these little baggies from the con represent whip scenes I did with different people. And I think the first night I threw 6 whip scenes, and then the second night I threw 7. But when I get back home, then I have to put Moodstone's crackers back on the whips because she's my 24/7 and she's my primary whip catcher. So we'll take out Moodstone's crackers. I'm going to do a couple videos tonight, but this one's just kind of a recap of the convention. And the great part about a con like that, when you have the opportunity to attend it with a few friends, is it's rejuvenating because you get to be around people that you don't see all the time, but you know, and so it's just a delightful time. The other part of it is you get to play in a dungeon in an environment that you're not familiar with, so it's fresh. There's fresh energy. And in my instance, I got approached by several people that were curious about whips. Some of them actually were experienced with whips, but they wanted, they wanted me to throw with them, which was a delight. You get three scenarios there in dungeon play when you're at a big con like that. In some regards, it feels like the whip lane's a carnival ride, because people that are curious about whips or have never felt a whip and want to experience it come by, and if they're brave enough, they'll ask for a scene. But the other aspect of it is you get an opportunity to play with people that maybe you only see once or twice a year, and that's always delightful. Then the other aspect of it is occasionally you'll get a very experienced whip bottom that you just haven't had an opportunity to play with before, and they're able to process the energy from the bullwhip, and you end up with a really great scene that's unexpected but delightful nonetheless, because you get to play with at a pretty high level of energy. So you get all three. You get people that you've played with before and are experienced with, and it's a little bit like a whip reunion. You get newbies that are just out for the carnival ride or out for an exploratorium, and then you get some experienced whip catchers that just haven't had an opportunity to catch your whip, and those are delightful experiences. I had the fortune to end my convention with that experience. Rowdy stood for me, and I had never had a chance to throw with Rowdy, but she was a delight, a complete delight, and hopefully somewhere down the road I'll get time to share time and space with her again. So one other trick that I learned actually years ago at a Dark Odyssey event was the frozen water bottle. Believe it or not, this little invention, if you freeze a bunch of water bottles and put them in your cooler instead of ice, then these melt slowly, and when they completely melt, then you have bottled water. But I find they last longer than ice does, and then you're on your feet all day at a con. You come into your room at night and your feet are killing you a lot of times. The dungeon floor is hard concrete, or the vendor's area is hard concrete, and you can put that bottle of frozen water on the floor, and you can do an ice foot massage with it and really rejuvenate your feet and make them feel good, and it helps you get through those long days of standing on your feet, teaching or playing in the dungeon. And then, I don't know, I've put frozen water bottles in my ice chest, and it seems like the ice chest stays cool for 2 or 3 days. And then again, at the end of that, you can always drink that water. So that's one of the convention tips I would pass on to you. It's not original to me. I learned that from someone, and when I was at a Dark Odyssey event, and I've used it ever since, and it works really good. So I'm just getting my crackers on. We had several suggestions. One was I had a question about East Coast swing, so I'm going to do a deep dive into signal whips and East Coast swing. So we'll look for that video. The other video I'm going to do is, most of the videos I've thrown dynamically to music on the channel. The camera angle's been behind me, looking at the person I was throwing with. And the comment was people couldn't see what I was doing with my arm and my hand, how I was throwing my forehand or my backhand. They couldn't see the finer points of how I was throwing. And the suggestion was to reverse the camera angle and have me throwing at the camera with the whip bottom standing beside the camera or behind the camera, so that the main focus of the camera was on me and how I was rolling the whip out, and not necessarily so much on the whip catcher, because the channel, either the leather journey or Whips in the Dungeon, is more about the technique of throwing and playing. So we're going to try some of those. I encourage you, if you have an opportunity next year, to check out Carolina Coastal Fetish Fair. It was a great convention. I enjoyed it. The hotel was great. The atmosphere was great. All the people were delightful. The dungeon equipment was top notch. Dr. Webb had put quite a bit of thought and effort into lighting. The lighting in the dungeon was very good, and the whip lane was adequate. They allowed me to make it a little bit wider. It was certainly plenty long enough, but it needed to be a little bit wider, and they certainly let me do that. What I did like about that event was there were quite a few DMs, but the DMs were what I call transparent. They didn't interfere in any scenes that I saw, but they were there to ensure that all the people playing were playing safely and that there wasn't any issues. So transparent DMs is not a negative comment. That's a very positive comment, because when you're scening, you don't want, you want to play safely, but you also don't want your scene interfered with unnecessarily, and that certainly didn't happen. So I appreciate you watching. Thanks for listening to my ramble. Hopefully you picked up a couple of tips tonight, and we're going to make a few more videos to try to answer some of the questions that I've gotten on my Patreon site. As always, thanks for watching The Leather Journey.